A fierce struggle for resources in the world of Fallout had been going on long before the nuclear war. Gas, although not quite as scarce as oil, was still valuable enough that numerous expeditions were sent out in search of new deposits. Today, we're going to look at the enormous natural gas reserves in Fallout 3 and find out the reason why they appeared in the first place. We'll begin today's story by visiting the wreckage of the USS Ozymandias. As soon as you reach the wreck in Point Lookout, the quest An Antique Land begins immediately. Inside, you'll find only a single cabin, with a computer, a safe, and various bits of loot scattered around. The most interesting part, however, is the wall-mounted terminal. From it, you can understand that the vessel apparently belonged to a company called Bishi Energy Partners. In the first entry, it's stated that the company approved the beginning of fieldwork as part of a project researching natural gas deposits. A certain Caroline Saunders is appointed as a lead geochemist, and all operations are coordinated with the local company Isla Negra Real Estate. Caroline's task is to collect samples of several different soil materials, as well as to produce a report on the concentration of natural biogas at the sites. To continue research in this area, the geochemist must record free-spoken confirmations of her discoveries in the form of holotapes. After obtaining them, the expedition staff are supposed to continue gathering information, while Bishi prepares a team to extract the natural gas. That same entry also lists the names of 4 assistants, who are Lowette, Roach, Rourke, and Antoine. We'll need to visit the 3 excavated muck holes, which will be marked in the Pip-Boy during the quest. But before we do that, it's worth paying attention to another confidential terminal entry. It's addressed to Dr. Martin Roach, in which a representative of Bishi thanks him for his cooperation and explains that he will be acting as an intern researcher under Caroline Saunders' supervision. Her experience conducting research in swamp conditions makes her the only suitable candidate for the role. However, she's also known for her liberal views and is quite popular in academic sphere. The company is concerned because it only recently received approval to operate in the region, and the mass burials from the American Civil War are the reason the local soil became useful for the company's purposes. The geochemist's political preferences could create certain difficulties for Bishi, and Martin Roach's task will be to ensure that the scientist does not connect Point Lookout's past with the rich biogas reserves. Martin is permitted to use the emergency protocol at his own discretion, and under no circumstances must Saunders be allowed to interfere with the gas field's development. You can collect the soil research recordings in any order, but today we'll begin with the cave containing the first tape. Following the marker to the muck hole, you can immediately notice geysers that push muddy bubbles to the surface, together with the biogas. The ground almost feels like it's alive right underneath your feet. Wandering around nearby, you can come across the entrance to the first cave, where no one will meet you inside. The cave itself, like the next 2, is filled with gas. A single gunshot inside will instantly trigger an explosion and cause serious injury to the player. On the floor, near a table with a broken terminal, lies someone's skeleton, most likely one of the 3 real interns. On the table, you'll find biogas canisters, an anti-radiation suit, and Caroline's first recording. In that first tape, the geochemist says the biogas concentration looks very promising. Most of the gas deposits are located in the limestone formations within the swampy zone. The exact quantity of gas is still unknown, but even the site alone already satisfies the research objectives and is suitable for development. Caroline leaves a couple of interns in this cave to clarify the details, even if she considers it's mostly a formality. To be sure that the gas concentration is not just a local anomaly, the geochemist decides to visit and investigate all the sites. At the second muck hole, you can find recording number 2 lying on a table beside 2 skeletons. It appears to be a woman and a man from Caroline's research group. The findings at the site were just as promising as before. The soil composition was similar, and the biogas concentration was approximately the same. The geochemist also discovered a natural cavity filled with a heavy lye residue, not to be confused with lime. Fortunately, the researchers were wearing protective suits, otherwise someone could have suffered serious chemical burns. Caroline begins questioning the connection between the first and second sites, wanting to return here and understand what links them together. A technician tells Caroline that he will need several hours to finish working on the ventilation unit. During that time, Caroline decides to visit the third and final site. She says that all further analysis will be conducted mostly for her own curiosity. In the third cave, you'll find yet another skeleton, the fourth one, lying beside a shovel, a clipboard and many pencils, along with Caroline's final recording. The biogas concentration is off the charts. According to the researcher, the underground layer consists of unexpectedly hard limestone stratum, which made it easy to locate natural cavities in the ground. Because of the abundance of calcite formations, such as stalactites and stalagmites, Caroline dares to suggest that underground water flow created an extensive network of caves and grottos beneath the entire region. Mapping the whole area would take an enormous amount of time, but it will be essential for future gas extraction. The researcher then admits she does not understand why there is such a massive amount of alkane material here. She wants to contact her colleagues and search for precedents. She also notes that this will take time, while Bishi will almost certainly want to begin extraction as soon as possible. In the end, Caroline adds that the third site is the most advantageous location for gas extraction. Next, you must bring all 3 recordings back to the ship, insert them in the terminal, and then open the safe on the right-hand side to claim plenty of useful loot. The terminal also contains one more corrupted entry. Bishi orders Martin Roach to carry out the emergency protocol, noting that Saunders attempted to contact her academic connections. She tried to link the alkane concentration with the decomposition of human remains. The company repeats once again that Martin must execute the emergency protocol and leave no evidence behind. Before assembling this puzzle, I think it's worth talking about the lie and the gas that became the subject of this research. In reality, Point Lookout contains an actual historical cemetery, also known as Hoffman's Camp. During the Civil War, Confederate soldiers were held in prisons along the shores of Chesapeake Bay. The federal government buried those who died from diseases, such as tuberculosis or malaria, in 2 cemeteries near the prisons. But frequent flooding caused erosion, and the remains had to be moved farther away from the water, which is exactly that was done. In 1870, after the war ended, bodies from both cemeteries were buried in a mass grave, roughly where the caves appear in Fallout. The grave contains about 3,382 known soldiers and 44 civilians, although the total number may be higher. Estimates suggest that up to 14,000 people could have died at the Hoffman's Camp. Let's return to the Fallout 3. Biogas is the product formed from the bodies of those who were buried after the Civil War. Yet in Fallout, there are no monuments or anything hinting at such a massive burial site. Over time, the remains apparently turned into lie, which pushed Caroline into starting her own mini-investigation. Once again, do not confuse lie, spelled as L-Y-E, with lime, spelled as L-I-M-E, as those are 2 different things. Biogas was released during the formation of that material. However, there is one curious detail worth pointing out. In the game, there are 3 separate locations with high biogas content that interested Bishi Energy. Perhaps in the Fallout universe, far more people were buried there than in our history, which would explain the absence of monuments. As for Caroline's story and how I interpret the events, Caroline arrives aboard the Ozymandias in Point Lookout, hired by Bishi Energy to conduct geological research. The company knew she was not particularly compliant and was driven by liberal ideology, so, disguised as one of the 4 interns, they sent a man named Martin to eliminate Caroline if she begins to suspect anything. Bishi Energy already knew that the caves and abundant biogas reserves existed because of the large number of mass graves in the area, which slightly contradicts the real US history. After visiting the first deposit, the geochemist decides to leave a couple of interns there to handle smaller tasks. Meanwhile, she heads to the second cave, where she begins questioning the abundance of gas deposits. A technician, possibly one of the interns, tells her he needs to work on the ventilation and will require several more hours to fix it. In the end, Caroline remains with the last intern and travels to the final gas deposit. In the third recording, beyond the soil research results, we learn that Caroline begins to suspect the true cause of the alkane main material. The company receives a report sent by Caroline over the radio, which can be found on the surface near the muck hole. Bishi Energy activates the emergency protocol, forcing Martin to get rid of Caroline, and he is ordered to leave no evidence, and therefore no witnesses. The fake intern was most likely nearby the Caroline at that moment, and he gets rid of her inside the cave. The fact that the body in the third cave is Caroline is suggested by the absence of a table or terminal, and the presence of shovel and clipboard nearby. She most likely intended to take soil sample and leave almost immediately. After all, as we know from the second entry, any further analysis were meant only for her own curiosity. Martin then goes to the second cave and disposes of the technician who was repairing the ventilation. Then he goes to the first cave and gets rid of 2 interns, which Caroline left behind. Bishi, in the meantime, was supposed to send a team to begin gas extraction, but the war prevented them from doing so. The only mistake in this story, it seems to me, is that one of the developers placed recording number 2 in the cave with 2 skeletons, and then placed recording number 1 in the next cave beside what appears to be technician's remains. This also matches the deposit layout in the game. The player naturally walks from the closest marker to the farthest, so in theory, the player should have found the first, second and third recordings in chronological order, and then uncovered the story along the way. But instead, we find the second tape first, with 2 skeletons, then the first, and only then the third. After disposing of the interns, Martin's fate is unknown, as is what the company ultimately did. Therefore, today's story can be considered complete. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please consider subscribing to the channel, turning on notifications by clicking the bell, leaving a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. See you next time.